Hello, friends, and welcome to the 38th episode of All New Snap Judgments. As always, I'm Roy Rogers, and joining me today is my friend and yours, Aaron Pulse Glazer. Aaron, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm okay. I got a little bit of a cold. Hopefully, I don't sound too bad, but otherwise, I'm doing well.
How you are recently returned from the humid halls of Florida. How was your time in one of our most cursed states?
I don't know what Blursted was, but it was good. We went to Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure for 4 days and had a really nice time. The first day and a half, it absolutely poured on us, so that was
Classic Florida.
Yeah, a little terrible. But when it didn't pour on us, the weather was really nice. It stayed about 65 degrees. We had a good old time.
Awesome. Well, we are also going to have a good old time tonight with our very special guest, Aaron, who is joining us this week to discuss Marvel Snap.
Well, we're doing our top 10 decks, so we, as always, have the king of all things tier list, the great, the one and only, Den. How you doing, Den?
I'm doing great. I mean, these intros just so good. I mean, I don't have anything to say after those intros because I'm just afraid I'm going to ruin it, to be honest.
You haven't ruined it yet. You're not going to ruin it by now.
Den, don't worry. Aaron will screw up the transition. Don't worry.
You just thought my name was Darren, even though we've known each other for a decade, sir.
Not a decade.
His wedding. Not really? Still? Okay.
Still not a decade, bro. Still not a decade.
Soon. All right.
Soon, yes.
Either way. Den, how can our friends find you?
Easiest way is Twitter, DenCCG. If you speak French, I have a YouTube channel called La Game du Matin, or just find articles on Marvel Snap Zone. That's probably the place where I put in the most work.
The YouTube is adorable. Just if you don't speak French, I don't. But it is very cute. You should 100% check it out. All right.
Quick note before you introduce our other special guest there, Aaron. I want to say to our Patreons, you can hear Glazer talk about Den's YouTube channel in last month's exclusive YouTube content, where Aaron gives his very clearly informed opinions of what Den's YouTube show is. So, another reason to encourage you.
Do you remember what I said? I don't even remember what I said.
No, I'm not going to spoil it because I want to encourage people to give you $10 a month. Now, there's other reasons, which we'll talk about in a little bit, of why you should sign up for our Patreon. But that is another one. All right, go ahead and introduce our other guest.
Well, this next person is probably the person most responsible for the reasons you should give me $10, and definitely not him. It is the architect of the Snap Judge League. We are joined by the big dumb idiot king himself, GunnyT. How you doing, Gunny? Congrats on your win, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am doing fantastic. It's a lovely evening. I'm excited. Busy evening for me. I'm currently running a Friday night Marvel Snap tournament while podcasting, so we're going to see how this goes.
Hey, Gunny, first, what'd you win, and then how can our people find you?
Oh, all right. Well, first, we'll start with how you could find me. So you could find me on X. It will be the Chad USMC. I'm on there just checking around, hitting the socials. You can also find me on several Discords at just Gunny, GUNNY, T, the letter T. And then you can also find me on YouTube making some Snap content at Snap Tactics GunnyT. Those are the places where you'd be able to find me the easiest and where I'm most active. And then what I won is, now I got to look it up. So I got it right here. It is the deck building event they did over on the main Marvel Snap Discord. So it was the Planet Hulk deck building finale that I ended up posting up my deck guide for Big Dumb Idiots. And then, it did really well. I had over 280 comments on it. Dexter and Regis both used the deck on their YouTube channels, so it just kind of blew up. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know the contest was happening. I made the guide because I'm a freak and I just love organizing everything. And I posted it onto the Marvel Snap Zone Discord first, and then the kid Snap. He's the one that told me about the competition. Like, hey man, why don't you just go throw this on there? So yeah, I did, and it won. It was awesome.
Cool. Right.
All right. Before we jump in and discuss the awesome main topics that we have today, we just got to remind you how you can engage with us on social media. All right. First and foremost is our X, Twitter, YZ, whatever Elon Musk is calling his social media platform currently. Our handle on that is at SnapJudgeCast. We are incredibly grateful every single week to be the official podcasting partner of Marvel Snap Zone. We are just so grateful, and we would be grateful of you, for you, especially loyal listeners and loyal viewers, if you went out and joined the Marvel Snap Zone Discord. That is the number one place to engage with Glazer 24/7, 365, even when he is in Florida with his family. He is on the Discord. He is responding to people, and he is overall just being a degenerate responder to comments and questions. So, and besides that, Marvel Snap Zone has the best large Discord in all of Marvel Snap. So please click the link in the description of this episode below if you are listening to this on YouTube, or in the description on your friendly neighborhood podcatcher if you're listening to the podcast version. If you want to try and email us and somehow get your message through all of the kick spam Aaron subjected this account to, you can email us at snapjudgmentspodcast@gmail.com. But we're now getting into, besides Marvel Snap Zone, the two most important socials we have. Let's start off with the YouTube, which is at Snap Judgments Pod, where each and every day, except for Saturdays, Aaron produces at least one Snap Take video. Aaron, my friend, if our loyal listeners were to become our loyal viewers, what would they find on the YouTube right now?
So this last week, you would actually find Fathor Newman, Gunny, and Savage Yeti because I was gone for half the week and they covered. We've also got 10 advanced tips for snapping that Gunny created in order to better, climb the ranks, hit infinite, whatever your goals are. They're basically the advanced tips in order to maximize your snapping. And next week, we've got, well, depending on when this comes out, we've got a video that's going to go over the 4 April new cards, along with 3 great new decks.
Awesome. Before we talk about our last way to engage with us, I will say that Yeti's guest spot on our YouTube channel was a great argument for why you should be subbed for him and not sub for us, definitely, and why Yeti's content is superior to Glazer's daily content.
No doubt.
Again, if you want an argument for other creators, make sure that you check out the guest spots they did on Glazer's Snap Take show over on our YouTube. All right, which is, again, just to make sure I don't screw it up, at Snap Judgments Pod. But if you do, for some misforgotten reason, love Glazer's content and love tournaments, you have an opportunity now to support both. Because starting next week, right? It is next week. It is happening, right? Is the Glazer should switch the slides for the YouTube video viewers, the Snap Judgments League. All right, where if you are a $1 patron, you get this awesome opportunity. Aaron, please, for our loyal listeners, describe how the Snap Judgments League will work.
All right. So you sign up. You sign up for the Patreon, the $1 tier. That gets you access to the league. You join the Discord. From there, you sign up for the league. Once you're signed up for the league, you'll be assigned a pod of 32 players. You're going to play 1 game a week against a player in that pod. The winner of that pod is going to get a season pass and put into a winner's pod. Winner's pod is single elimination, top 8, 16, whatever it is. And that winner becomes the Snap Judgments League champion. So 1 game a week, $1, tons of prizes throughout. We also are doing, you can find it on our X, it's to our Discord right now, a Dan Hip print giveaway in support of this league, and we've got so much more. Gunny, why don't you tell us a little bit about the league?
All right, thank you. The league has, so I want to talk a little bit about the logistics of the league. So I have been a Magic the Gathering judge for almost a decade now. And one thing that's always been very memorable to me is whenever events kind of are not great because the logistics are all jacked up. So we're using some really good software by topdeck.gg. They are really big in the Magic the Gathering world and then branching out into other games. But basically, through their web app, that's how you're going to find out who your opponent is. That's how you're going to report your rounds. And it's all just very clean and smooth. So that's my main point there is like the logistics of this is good. We've run test rounds of it, and there's more stuff we're going to be doing, such as the tournament that I'm running right now. I just did it through the Top Deck app. The members of our Patreon that are already in our Snap Judgment League are signed up. They already had an account on there. It was one button click for them to enter my 8-man single elimination tournament, and they're almost done with it. We're on semifinals right now, and I started 49 minutes ago. So we're really cooking over there. We've turned it almost into like this huge event. It's not only the league, but you got the Snap, the tournament that I'm doing tonight, and I'll be doing more of them. I don't know how big or how small I'll be making them, but just throughout, we're going to do some more stuff. And you got the Dan Hip competition variants. There's going to be all kinds of stuff that we're going to continue to just build this community effort, and it's going to be so much fun every single week.
And pretty soon, we're going to bully Den into joining the league. So if you want your chance to play the one and only Den in a league, this is your chance. He usually doesn't mingle with us mere mortals without us giving him money. So like this is your only chance to deal with our favorite Den.
All right. Before we move into this jam-packed episode, I want to make 2 quick notes about the Patreon. A lot of Patrons are a pyramid scheme where it's designed to flow money up to that single content creator. This is the opposite. This is a pyramid, the opposite of a pyramid scheme, where Glazer is almost certainly going to be spending more money than he takes in. So this is just a huge opportunity. The $1, I don't even want to say the $1 membership covers the cost because it really doesn't. So please, if you're interested, this is just such an awesome opportunity. Second, there's not a lot of other opportunities in card game space to play with some of the top content creators, particularly online only card games like Marvel Snap. There's no Magic Fests to quote what's going on this weekend, for example. We get an opportunity to play against the pros, but this is your opportunity both to play against normies like yourselves and our loyal listeners and some of the most famous people in Marvel Snap. So this is a very unique tournament experience, I think, across all card games, which is why I think it's really awesome that the show is sponsoring it. And I just want to also say real quick, when I say how cool it is, Snap Judgments is a net negative from my bank account as well. So I am also not bought here. Let's just be clear. All right, let's move on to the main segment we have today. We've got some viewer questions, first and foremost.
2 viewer questions. I thought that our guests, including you, Roy, would really like these.
All right. Do you want to read them, Aaron, or do you want me to do it?
Sure, I got it. So Rafael Sosa asks, are you more a Spike, a Timmy, or a Johnny? And just a quick explanation. A Spike is the competitive player, a Johnny likes combos, and Timmy likes to play big dumb things. So, Gunny, since you've played Magic for 10 bajillion years, why don't you lead us off? Are you a Spike, Timmy, or Johnny?
I am definitely a Timmy. I like playing big giant things, simple. They go crush, and that's kind of who I am. I mean, I made Big Dumb Idiots, and I love it. But even a little bit further down, so you explained them really well. But a Spike is also more like tournament grindy, not just deck choice, but like somebody who's like gonna get gonna make all the best, most OP plays. A Timmy, it really just wants to play big things go burr. And Johnny, on the other hand, really likes to tell a story through their gameplay. That's another way to kind of look at that.
Den, where do you fall?
I guess I'm a mix of Spike and Johnny, but the story part that Gunny just explained really resonated. So I guess I'm more of a Johnny than a Spike. Like, the more time passes, the more I'm going to the Johnny side.
Roy?
As a notorious hater of psychometrics like this in both my hobby and especially Glazer knows, when people whip out these things in teaching, it's extremely unsufferable.
Oh, well,
when they start talking about Yes, the types of students or types of teachers. But I will, for the sake of this, say I'm definitely a Johnny. To be like the super precise, I'm like a spiky Johnny, but I do like telling stories from a gameplay, strong combos. It's more important to do cool things than it is necessary to win the game.
Definitely a Johnny. Do cool things.
I think that we're a podcast of Johnnies, which means ranking the top 10 decks is going to be fun. But I almost never play whatever the best deck is. So, yeah. We're all
I
on the
do
same
when
page.
it's a combo deck.
Yeah, sure. But then when it's Hella, we're like, ooh, not that one. Thanks.
So I would
played a bit of Ella. You need
Me
to
too.
know how to beat it.
I played Hella the previous 2 seasons when it wasn't the best. Now it's the best. I'm like, oh, get that away from me.
I will tell you that the true Glazer move is this. The true Glazer from his truly degenerate competitive days was this: to play whatever deck he wanted and then complain when the rest of us or he didn't play that deck later after the tournament. So it'd be like, oh yeah, I played my awesome cool brew. Why didn't we just play X deck? We should have all just played X deck. And we're like, you could have also done that. Like, you had as much agency
I was
as
never
everyone
going
else
to.
in this conversation. Okay, so anyway, yes, that is why Glazer is fundamentally, as spiky as he's been in the past, a Johnny. All right, why don't you read this?
So
wall
Robert
text
Rivern,
first?
Robert Rivern specifically was asking me this. He's one of our patrons, and he wanted to ask Den. He was like, "How do I get this question done?" I was like, "Well, I'll be talking to Den in a few hours." So, all right, I think I know the answer. But Marvel Snap is a game about winning 2 of 3 locations. I know that this is breaking news to everyone listening. And having more points than your opponent. There are plenty of decks that can have more points than Hella locked on 2 locations, and then there's a list of decks. Why don't people play the decks going higher than Hella instead of playing the same stale core builds with Zabu Shang-Chi they've played for a year now? Are all these decks oppressed by the Zabu Saratech soup decks? If so, why aren't we looking at the problem through the lens of having so many decks that can go higher than Hella being made unviable by the same Zabu Shang-Chi mid-range crap we've seen for a year now?
Okay, I'll try to answer all the questions one by one because it's cool because they actually kind of answer each other and they explain the current metagame. So why don't people play decks going higher than Ella Lockjaw? There are 2 reasons. Number one, there's reliability. Phoenix, Negative, Wong Panther, Shuri, Living Tribunal, they all are able to go higher than Ella Lockjaw. The difference is Ella Lockjaw does it most games, those don't. We have the snap mechanic, so we can mitigate the fact that we don't do it as often with the snap, but there's that. The second reason, I would say, is the fact that Ella Lockjaw can also include text now, because we have Corvus, Sandman has started to be a card in Ella, and that shuts down part of those decks. Are all these decks oppressed by the Zabu Saratech sub decks? Absolutely yes. As soon as you play an Enchantress, half those decks just die, which is unfortunate, but that's the sad reality of the game we live in currently. And what was the last part of the question?
Why aren't people complaining about Zabu bullshit then?
I feel like they do. It's just that maybe they got tired of it after some point, because you can't just complain about the same stuff. And I guess like Zabu Shang-Chi isn't like the deck. It's part of it, and you're gonna see it with a lot of different things. I mean, a year ago it was only with Darkhawk. Then it started being with some of Darkhawk. Since Annihilus came around, there's more of Annihilus. Recently, we've had it with like Thor, Beta Ray Bill, and Jane Foster. So I guess my answer is because Zabu has a much better ability to adapt and create what I will call fake diversity, which is it does the exact same thing. It just does it with different cards. So you think it's a new deck, but it's actually just the same deck with other cards included.
Cool. I think that covers it.
Actually, I want to slightly expand on what Den is saying there, because I think it's a consequence of a lot of the OTA and patch nerfs recently, because I think what they've targeted for nerfs are other, like, I think Elsa is a really good example of this. Very powerful card, but it's a great way to go big without relying on an ongoing. right? Because they've created this sort of like triangle of powerful things to do, which is like Hella Lockjaw, then Shang-Chi / Sarah, and then the sort of like ongoing based like combo decks, right? Which Mr. Negative isn't really one of those, but I think the most consistent of those is the Living Tribunal deck. And like those three are kind of like constantly at war with each other. And the only way to break this, because of how powerful the tech cards are, is to have something that can go around the tech cards and still be really powerful. And they've really declared war on those over the last like 3 or 4 months, which is good because like cards like Elsa were really unbalanced. Werewolf, which didn't entirely get around like Shang-Chi, but gave you a lot of options to sort of bounce around, and a good player could sort of like, a lot of out leveling each other. Like the fact that they declared war on a lot of these, and even declared war on junk, which were all ways to sort of like clog the board or go zag around these sort of like 3 primordially powerful approaches to the game, has really reduced the metagame to them. And like, I don't super hate this metagame, unlike a lot of people. But I think if you're like looking for, I wouldn't even say I think like a diversity with more depth. I think there's a lot of diversity in the meta, but there's not actually a lot of depth to that diversity right now. So.
Yeah, I agree. Like as you said, like the meta right now is kind of pick a side. Are you on the side of easy, reliable points? Are you on the side of less reliable but more points? Or are you on the side of my opponent is not going to get points, but I have much less than them, than the average as well?
Sure. I would like it, and I don't know how to make this the case again, for early games to matter, and I don't feel like they do currently. I think that's one of the big things that is frustrating. So part of what makes Hela and Zabu so good is that there's nothing else to do early, right? You're either foregoing the early game and just saying, I'm going to spend my early game getting rid of cards with stuff like Hela, or just drawing and getting rid of shit with stuff like Thanos, right? Or I'm going to spend my early game playing Zabu and then just skipping the early game and dropping a bunch of mid-rangey things and then hoping my tech can win. But there's nothing early I can do that can scale up to late game. Like, I feel like Snap really lacks scaling right now. Maybe Morbius, but like largely lacks scaling right now.
Well, the problem with scaling is because decks are so flexible, once you tell your opponent where your points are going to be, they either counter you or they just play the other 2 lanes, or they retreat. So
yeah, well,
unfortunately, like scaling
what
makes
scales big enough for it to matter?
Boring.
It didn't always.
Morbius, Collector, but I mean, obviously Collector got nerfed.
Sure, Morbius, Collector to some extent. But like Collector with Loki was scaling big enough to matter, right? Angel used to be scaling big enough to matter, even if it was like telling you Elsa was big enough scaling to matter, Kitty was big enough scaling to matter, Bishop was big enough scaling to matter, and it's still close. Hitmonkey was big enough scaling to matter, it got nerfed, right? Like it all got nerfed into the ground. Everything that scales up so that it can actually compete with the big 6 cost things. Like, I honestly can't think of a thing that really wasn't.
Well, I think you kind of pointed out something there as well. So talking about scaling isn't only just small cards that that grow like Elsa or like a Werewolf by Night. Scaling is also just putting points in a lane, right? So you put 5 points in a lane, and you put 8 points in a lane, and you put 10 points in a lane. Like, that's scaling that lane throughout the early game. And the decks like Sarah that are able to counter that in one way, shape, or form are outperforming those because they know where those points are going. And then Hela beats that because there's no way to predict where these massive amounts of points are falling on the final turn. So that's really the two opposites there. Is you are scaling through, cards and building up your lane, or you're just doing it all on the last turn.
Fair.
I think that this is a consequence of their own design choices. Like, when they said that they wanted to push 6 drops, like, this is the consequence of saying like, oh yeah, we want to put 6 drops and make them more powerful. Well, that means what was making the 6 drops bad was the scaling or points that 2 and 3 drops could do. So it's this like ping-pongy sort of like, people want Magneto style cards to be powerful again, and big splashy things that seem to be worth 6 energy. Okay, well, that means those 2 drops that were splashy and fun and scaling need to be kept in check so that there's still space to breathe. And then you end up in this, well, what deck can sneak in, a huge number of 6-drops very efficiently? And that's like hella. So I think that Snap's design team is going to have to sort of like think again about where they want to put power. And it might mean moving away from some of these big splashy 6-drops. But I think speaking of splashy cards that scale, though, let's talk about a 3-drop. All right, so we've got Corvus Glaive, who is a 3-cost, 5 strength, Series 5. What does 6K tokens get you here? On reveal, discard 2 cards from your hand to get +1 max energy. Just to be clear, you actually have to discard 2 full cards for this to trigger. And I will throw it to you, Gunny. What do you think of the latest member of the Black Order to join Marvel Snap?
I think Corvus Glaive feels like cheating in the decks that it wants to be in. So here's the example. You play it in Hela. If you don't discard Hela, then you've just cheated and you win. You play it in Thanos. If you don't discard the things you don't want to discard, then you stay in and you win. So the places it wants to be, when it does the thing it wants to do, then you just win. And most people aren't snapping before turn 3 anyways, if they have this card, right? Unless they obviously see a good play coming up. But yeah, just whenever it doesn't hit the thing you don't want it to hit, then it's very hard to lose from that position unless your opponent is also cheating. So basically, cheating good equals winning. And then if that doesn't happen, you just retreat.
Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
I agree with most of that. I mean, Corvus just makes something that was good already better. And the big question was, how reliably can we get the 2 discards without destroying our deck? And the thing is, at first, when we started discussing, well, we're just going to do Ella, people were like, yeah, but what if you discard Ella? Well, I have +1 energy. If I discard Ella, I can still go like 5-6-6. And Ramp has done that for months and has been a good deck. And I don't even have to play 1 card. So although Corvus Glaive limits the amount of like cards in your hand, if you build your deck the right way, you don't need 6 cards in your hand to play Marvel Snap. You just need the right one every turn. And if the right one, you have like 4 copies of it, you're good. You're going to have the right one so often that it doesn't really matter what you discard in the end.
It's hard to disagree with any of that. I think I don't mind Corvus. Mostly because I've been playing Corvus like kind of where he is meant to be played, which is Morbius discard. Like I've really enjoyed the ways in which it has re-energized that archetype and given some like kind of like interesting new plays, particularly with Hellcarrier that wasn't really possible before. So I think, but like so many times with these like big splashy effects, it's a card that it probably will end up being better in a good shell, or making a deck like Hela, which is another discard synergy deck, even stronger. So it's hard to disagree. I think this is definitely, to me, the most powerful card this month. I was absolutely sort of pleased to open caches for it. I opened 3. First I got X-23, then I got Corvus, and then I got Gladiator. So I kind of got everything I wanted without the slush. So this was a great week for Roy when it comes to Marvel Snap card acquisition. And I got a very powerful card that I've enjoyed playing.
Corvus is really strong. I don't know. Like, there's not... people were like, I don't know if this is going to be good. I had it as my second most powerful card of the month after Supergiant. I think I'm going to have to eat the L on Supergiant for the time being. But, like, I thought Corvus was very obviously very strong. There's enough ways that Ramp is super strong that if you can play more than 1 card and you can do more than 1 powerful thing in a deck, then you're going to do great. I don't know. I don't think Corvus is anything like a problem card. I think the ways Corvus is a problem are related to other cards, particularly Lockjaw, particularly like Thanos, and I'm curious to see what Corvus does in a Thanos deck if Lockjaw's removed, whether that's like overpowered or just an interesting deck. My gut says that that is a very good deck, a very interesting deck, but no longer a completely busted deck, though I'm willing to be wrong. I think that Corvus is interesting design space, and it's new and it's fun, and I'm all for it. It's a card that I think if you have Thanos, you should probably get, or if you like Hela, you should probably get.
All right, real quick before we move on. Den, open, buy with tokens, or skip?
Corvus?
Yes.
Well, if you already have the 2 other cards or don't care, I think it's worth the 6K. Otherwise, it's open. I mean, I opened for him, and I was very happy with it.
Gunny?
Plus, it's the kind of
Yeah,
card
I mean,
that grows with time. Like, unless they nerf it, which we can't like plan for it, there's no way Corvus gets worse. It's worst case, it's as good as it's now. Best case, they keep adding discard targets. Hello next week, and Corvus only grows in power. So even if you don't like it now, eventually they're gonna print another card that's gonna make you like it.
Gunny?
I have to agree. This is an open week. If you don't own any of the other 2 cards, like this is probably one of the best weeks of the month because both X23 and Gladiator are super performers. I know X23 is very localized into destroy decks, really, but it's what makes that deck tick. And then Gladiator has just been showing up all over the place. So very strong week to open if you don't own those, and then it's worth your 6K tokens. That's what I did. I bought it with 6K.
Glazer, open, buy, or pass?
I mean, if you need the other 2 cards, it's an easy open because the other 2 cards are both like top tier cards, right? Gladiator is important and X23 is important. So if you need either, please open. But even if not, I think this is a buy. The real question, I think, is what would you rather have, this or Cull? And I think that's a much harder question to answer.
That
That's
is
fair.
a hard question.
Well, we will talk about that next week when we get to our retrospective. I will also say the X23 variant is lit. Anyway, let's move on to our main topic. Aaron, why don't you explain to our loyal listeners and loyal viewers what we're going to be doing for the foreseeable future?
For the next several hours, we have 4 decks that are definitely tier 1. I know it says 5 on the screen. Ignore that. We have 4 decks that we agreed are tier 1. The other decks, we're going to start at a wildcard round. They're going to be 5 through 10. We're going to go through and rank them. This isn't going to be visual on the slides as we talk, but we'll have it at the end. And we're going to start, as always, with the wildcard decks. Unless this is your first episode, you've heard us do this basically every month since we came to Snapzone. Cool? Let's get started. I just pressed a weird button. Let's get started with our wildcard decks. I'm going to read through the 16 wildcard decks. We're going to be choosing 6 of them, although a wildcard deck has in the past, I believe, kicked off a top deck that we agreed on. The decks are Big Dumb Idiots, Beta Ray Hawk, Bounce, Bounce Junk, Discard, Good Cards Junk, Hella Corvus, Hella Tribunal, Inchi Not, Lockdown, Loki, Negative, Phoenix, Sarah, Shuri, and Zoo. So 6 of these cards will make the top 10. We all ready to talk about the first? And we should talk about the first 2 at the same time as always? Yeah?
Yeah.
We good?
Do this.
All right, so our first 2 decks are Bigger Dumber Idiots by our friend GunnyT. When I realized this was on the list, I was like, oh, Gunny, you got to come on. So the deck is, right now, Forge, Zero, Armor, Maximus, Cosmo, Gladiator, Atuma, Colobsidian, Ronin, Blob, Scar, and Destroyer. And against Bigger Dumber will be Hammer Control, which is the Safety Blade version of Beta Ray Bill. It is running basically Shadow King, Zabu, Jeff, Scarlet Witch, Killmonger, Mobius, sometimes Ghost replace either Killmonger or Mobius. The Thors, all 3 with Beta Ray, Thor, and Jane. Shang-Chi, Ms. Marvel, and Enchantress. So it's basically saying I get my points from my hammers, and I've got all the control pieces to win the game too. Which of these do you think is better? We will start with Den, because I'm a guess. I know Gunny's answer.
Well, I tested the hammer control this week because I was curious on how he was doing. And I haven't tested the other one, but I was very disappointed with the hammer control because unless you get the whole hammer synergy, I feel like the deck is kind of a weaker Sarah control, and I don't really like Sarah control in this meta already. So I'm gonna go with the other deck because I tested one, I didn't like it.
Gunny?
Yeah, I am not a big fan of decks with lots of moving pieces. I mean, obviously, Safety did a fantastic job, and he has a great win rate with it. I have had pretty great success with Bigger, Dumber Idiots. Got me back into top 1K pretty easily. And I think, from my experience in the metagame right now, it can contest against against the Thanos, and it can contest against Hela. Obviously, both can outdo it, but it has the points to put up on the board, especially if you're focusing on 2 lanes to contest those decks. And I think that's really what we're going to end up pointing to for this whole evening is how do you we should probably even look at what the top 4 are, because all we're doing is talking about can these decks contest with the top 4. Destroy's on that list. Well, this one has armor and Cosmo.
Hella. Yeah. So the top 4 are just going to be Hella, Sandman, Hella, Thanos, and Destroy.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think Bigger Dumber is an easy pick here. I actually like Hammer Control more than my compatriots here. It is more my style deck. But Shadow King feels like a dead card in 80% of matchups right now. Zabu is great, but you better draw Zabu for this deck to have any chance against anything. And then you need to draw Zabu and a Thor and Jane, and so it's very draw dependent. I think the Bigger Dumber Idiots is easily ahead of it. I think the Bigger Dumber Idiots is very likely to end up on the list.
Yeah, hammer control's too fiddly. This meta is not a time to whip out your fiddle. It is, yeah. So sorry to friend of the show, Safety Blade, but I think we're gonna all pass on this one for now.
All right, the Safety Call Bounce. This is basically the bounce list. I run the hood in mine because running a bounce list where I can't play 3 demons seems silly to me. But this is basically, it's running the 4 1-drop bounce package: Forge, Ham, Iceman, and Nico. Again, I run Hood over either Ham or Iceman, depending on my mood. I'm back to making that be Ham over Iceman. I was running Iceman over Ham, but sometimes you hit Hela, right? And that's good. Although sometimes you hit Infinite, and that's bad. Whatever. You win some, you lose some. And then it's running Beast Falcon and Black Swan as a little package, and then it's got Zabu with Shang-Chi, Enchantress, Cull Obsidian, and Werewolf by Night. It is crazy strong. It puts up a distressing amount of power. Where are we putting the bounce? Let's just go Den, Gunny, Roy Me, so we can just keep it going.
Amongst the reactive decks, which is the decks with Zabu, Shang-Chi, and tech cards included, I think it's one of the only ones which is able to compete with with Ella and Thanos and these kind of deck currently. So to me, this is easy top 5 deck currently.
Is it better than Bigger, Dumber Idiots?
Yes.
Gunny?
Yeah, I think it's a proven archetype. The one problem I think it's suffering from right now is it does have a cap on how much power it can actually output. Obviously, Shang-Chi can be huge, but it almost caps out a lane at 20-something power? What is the most we're able to put in more than one lane?
I mean, get Werewolf out on 3, and I can get you a lane to 40.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of it, are you running the hood? Right, let's assume the hood is in this, because this not running the hood.
Yeah, to me, Iceman is out for the head most of the time.
And I'm not talking about what we can do if all the stars align. What is our average output of points?
So 1 lane 20, and 1 lane is supposed to be won by tech.
Yeah,
you get up to 26ish, 28ish in 1 lane. 1 lane can usually compete with the best of a Shuri Red Skull. I played a lot of this.
Yeah,
I love bounce, right? So 1 lane can usually compete with the best of a Shuri Red Skull, and 1 lane you're saying I should be able to win this. I can get to 18 in 1 lane, and then I can Shang and Enchantress in 1 lane. And if My 18 doesn't win in one lane, then the Shangan Enchanter should win in the other.
It's a good deck. Absolutely. I mean, it's above Big Dumb Idiots.
I mean, I don't think it's going to take out any of the top 4. That's why they're not. That's why it's on the list. But I'd be shocked if this and Big Dumb Idiots didn't make our finalist. I think that I think this Boundless list is great.
I just think it needs like one more piece to be up on the top 4 though. Like it's so close, but it is just lacking a little bit of power. Like in that third lane, you lose to like 10 points of power in that lane or something.
No, never. That never happens.
Yeah.
Because that third lane is just demons, right? Like demons handle that problem for you pretty well. You end up in the high teens in every lane.
I kind of understand what Gunny is saying. The thing we have to consider is this deck is usually more flexible than almost any opponent you can put in front of it. So a lot of the time, you're going to have a bad lane, but you're going to have all the information you need to decide which one it is. And that's often going to be either the bad lane of your opponent, or that's going to be points they need in order to challenge you on the other two. So it's not really that you have a bad lane, it's really that you abandon one, so you literally crush the other two.
This deck would love Hitmonkey if Hitmonkey and Werewolf weren't so goddamn anti-synergy. That's why it runs Cull. It runs Cull almost as like, this is Hitmonkey now.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is number 1 currently. Number 2 is Bigger Dumber, and number 3 is Hammer Control. Next we have the last season number 1 deck. It is the Bounce deck that is running the Annihilus package. So it's running, again, 4 1-drops, but now we've got Nico and Hood, and we're ditching... What are we ditching?
Cull.
Iceman and Cull. Thank you. And we've got... Cull is definitely wrong in this deck. I've seen people play Cull, by the way. It's not right. We still got the Beast Falcon. We're not bothering with Black Swan. It's not worth it in this deck. We've got Zabu, then we've got Shang, Werewolf Enchantress, Sentry instead of Cull, and Annihilus. Where does this deck rank?
I think this deck ranks right behind the Bounce we just saw.
I think Bigger Dumber beats this.
Really? Just because we changed 2 cards?
Yeah, Cosmo is really obnoxious for this deck.
Who's running Cosmo?
I
right
mean,
now?
so on this list, like, are we talking about a deck that can be
into
like,
the meta?
Right, we're talking into the meta, right? So here's my question: why isn't this deck better right now? Like putting stuff on your opponent's side of the board for both Hela and Thanos seems great.
I think everyone just stopped playing it.
This deck's, it's got to, I mean, it should be good. So I've already looked through the list. Like we'll get there eventually, but like I feel like putting things on your opponent's side of the board is better right now than it's been.
I mean, the Beast change really hurt this list. Like, really hurt this list.
Yeah, it's just not flexible enough. Like, when you go Sentry on turn 4, you're almost obligated to go Annihilus on turn 5. And a lot of the time, Ella, like, the -10 is not enough. Like, if they get the Infinite on that lane, or they can Magneto, stuff like that, like, move around some of your pieces. So I just think like -10 isn't that good. And the other thing is Destroy still is one of the most popular decks in the game.
Yeah. And I think, Dan, you just kind of touched on something that I didn't really think about. And that is that Sentry is so vulnerable in this list, right? So any Shang-Chi just kind of takes it out. There's no way to protect it. So you're losing your points there. Annihilus is only 6 points. So if they can somehow block your 10 or just ignore that lane, that's what I do a lot of times, just ignore that far right lane. It's just, yeah, I think that's where it really comes down to is it's kind of flexible, but not flexible enough. And that Sentry just dies. And I know Cull dies before, but you have that extra slot that Annihilus opens up because you're not dropping a -10 power thing on your side.
I mean, Cull is a turn 6 play and Sentry is a turn 4 play is the real difference.
Yeah.
Like, I'm almost never playing Cull early in that list. Cull is meant to be a play on turn 6 when I need power. I think this is the third. I just think this deck, like, I think it's really hard to overstate how much Beast hammered this list. Because you cannot Beast on 5 in this list if you have to Annihilus on 5. Which means that your Werewolf is now, like, much, much more vulnerable. You don't have the Black Swan. So like, and you can't play Black Swan because you also have a Nihilist, right? Like you end up running face first into like a wall of a problem because Beast doesn't work, and because now you're priced into this exact play pattern.
I mean, that's what Den just talked about for the bounce deck, was that it's more flexible. It doesn't tell you where your points are going to go in the final turn. This deck tells you where those points are going to go.
Yeah. I think this is number 3.
I mean, honestly, to me, the discussion was really like, which bounce deck do we keep? And we all agree we're keeping the previous one. I mean, it's 2-card difference.
But the cards that change the whole deck.
Okay, sure.
Right? Like sometimes 2 cards change entirely how a deck plays.
Yeah, I mean, that's because you picked like not you picked, but they picked linchpin cards, right? Like Call and Sentry, while nominally similar cards, are actually radically different cards. And I definitely agree here that this is an inferior deck list. And I also don't think it's leveraging the strengths of the Annihilist package.
Yeah,
as
Roy
well
makes
as
a great point.
Could be, so.
Right, so like Nico and Iceman swap in this deck. That's not a big deal. Like those could just happen.
No.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it's not a linchpin card. So, like, he's talking about linchpin cards making and breaking decks. Like, if you were to add, if you're going to take Nico out of this deck and put an Iceman there instead, like, it's the same deck.
Yes, but I think you're underselling how good Nico is in bounce.
Yeah, that's 100% true. But like, let's talk about the philosophical point Gunny's trying to reinforce.
I get it.
How about we pick? We have 3, the 4 most impactful 1-drops here, right? But let's say Hood, right, which is impactful, but not necessarily as impactful as Nico could be sometimes, right? Or Spider Ham that could just win games for you, right? And swap it out with another 1-drop, right? It's anyway.
I get it. Let's move on. This deck is done. All right, discard Dracula.
Beautiful deck.
This is the standard discard Dracula, except now it runs Corvus Glaive. It's got the Miek Collector Swarm thing going. I'm going to straight up say I think the Black Swan versions of this are better than the Corvus versions of this. Not Black Swan. Supergiant versions of this are better.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait,
I think
what's the card that's better than
Supergiant is better than Corvus for this list.
Supergiant is better than Corvus in this card? Okay, I'm listening.
So what you end up doing is you either hide your MODOK so that you can play Wong on it. Obviously, 2 cards different, right? So you can play Wong on it, and then like your opponent doesn't know that power explosion. They can't stop it unless they have Goliath. They can't really stop it. And you just go completely like crazy with power to end the game.
Okay, wait. How do we use Cosmo as an excuse for the previous deck, and then he doesn't exist for this one?
He does. It's just a lot of places aren't playing Cosmo. So Cosmo is great when Cosmo is present, right? How present is Cosmo? Cosmo's coming back. If Cosmo's coming back, then this deck is much more dangerous, right?
Okay.
I think Cosmo's coming back largely just because people are... I mean, look, Cosmo's good and should always kind of be played. But Cosmo is a meta presence right now because people are desperate for anything that can stop Hela.
True.
So is that... Yeah, that might push this one above. I don't know. This is like the bottom deck on the list for me, but go ahead. Convince me otherwise.
No, I mean, I think Discard Dracula got better with Corvus. It's just every deck with Ella is better than this one inside the Discard synergy, so it's unfortunate, but this one is not going to be very high because inside its own archetype, it's like 4/5, and it's really hard to say as a French guy.
Gunny?
Hey, I think this just kind of is a little fickly at times, right? The things have to line up correctly. If you draw them out of order, then it ends up being a little bad. I think this deck will be much better next week, possibly. So, or something along this line of doing some discardy things and ending up somewhere in the middle. And then people play this deck very poorly a lot for some reason. Also got to look at where your stats come from. So a lot of your stats are coming from Collector and Morbius. a lot of people will stack those two into the same lane just to get enough power, especially if you're not doing the Wong stuff where you're like doubling up on that. They need both of those cards almost to be in the same lane to defeat some of the hella stuff going on. And then you're relying on Dracula and maybe like a MODOK to win a different lane. So that's where I think it kind of peters out, is just being, it can put the power out there to beat some of these other big decks, but things have to line up a lot better than they do for those other decks.
Corvus, I think, gave this deck a little bit more flexibility if its hands are awkward, and does let you play Helicarrier, which is like what I said earlier, which I think being able to like actually leverage Helicarrier if things, again, go sideways. I think one of Discard's biggest problems up to this point was its plan Bs all completely sucked. And now its plan Bs are just okay, which is a huge upgrade from where it was before. I think you're definitely right that, like, in a world where Hala is, queen, this is maybe a little bit weaker. I think it's less random, like, in where it puts its power, which can be a strength to Hela, because, like, sometimes Hela loses to itself. And this deck, played semi-competently, seldom loses to itself the way Hela can. But because it's more predictable, I think it makes it more vulnerable to hate, in the form of Cosmo, in the form of a well-placed Shang-Chi, or other things. So I think, really, this is definitely better than the bounce deck that we poo-pooed on previously, but it's definitely, so I would put this at third of the three decks we've talked about, and it will probably slip down further as we go along.
Oh, I forgot that we were putting this in a place. I think this goes after Big Dimity. It says my personal opinion.
I don't think this can beat a bounce deck. It's got to be after bounce.
I think it's after bounce as well. As for the big immediates, I think it's in that same range. It's just whoever gets the better draw and gets the most points in between the two, if we were to get them to face off.
So this is this better than junk bounce though?
We haven't gotten there.
Like, I think Big Dumb Idiots is better. I think Junk Bounce is better.
Sure. I mean, it's... Yeah. I don't know, to me, Junk Bounce is just a debate of whether we consider it to be a separate deck than the other bounce, or is just which bounce is the better one currently.
Okay. I'm going to throw it there for now. I don't think either of these are likely to make it, but let's see. Next up, Good Cards Junk. This is our Darkhawk list. There's always a Darkhawk list. This is our Darkhawk list. It also runs the Annihilus package. It also runs Alive, because why would it not? That's the list, right? Like, it's literally the Darkhawk package plus the Annihilus package plus Alive. This deck is good.
This deck is...
Starting with Din, right?
Yeah, this deck is good. To me, it's like behind the good bounce. And like in between that bounce and that other group of decks, basically. I have a hard time keeping the rankings in mind, because...
number two right now is still Bigger, Dumber. Idiots.
Number two right now, then it takes number two. It's also more flexible, and I think this metagame, in a way, kind of rewards being flexible, because at least you can pick which deck you're going to go against. Like, for example, this list has Shadow King, which I personally think most people should cut at this point, and should play instead like a Rogue or a Mobius, that kind of stuff. So... I think, like, if we're not talking about the very best decks in the game, which we haven't really gone to except for bounce, you need to be like flexible enough so you can adapt, and this deck does it, while some of the decks we've seen previously can't.
All right, so this is the deck I was actually most excited to talk about. How does this perform against Thanos? That's one question I really got.
You want the answer? Did Thanos see Blob?
Yeah, I mean,
If Thanos didn't see Blob, it's got a really, really great matchup. And if
and
Thanos
maybe that
did
Shadow
see
King
Blob,
spot is like the real one that needs to change, because this deck plays really well into Hela, does it not? You're putting a bunch of rocks in there, so you're making their lockjaw
and
kind
you
of
stop a
awful.
draw. I personally run Grandmaster in that spot.
I could see a Grandmaster there for a double Shang-Chi or something.
Yeah, you can double Shang-Chi, and if you're
double
not ready on
rocks, all that
4,
kind of stuff.
double rocks. Your turn 5 when you don't sentry is kind of dead, and being able to go, okay, so now I'll just throw my Rock Slider Widow over. Yeah, I think that this is probably number 2 because it has so many good matchups. Blob is the bad matchup, right?
I think
Blob and Leech.
I think this deck just it's a lot better than, and people aren't playing it right now. It's got to be good, especially into Hela. It just beats Hela unless they get lucky.
Yeah, but they do.
I know, and it always feels bad.
So yeah, I run a very different version of this. I don't think it even needs the junk package, although the junk package is obviously very good, right? Throwing things on both, again, as noted earlier, throwing things on both Hela and Thanos' side of the board is extremely frustrating for them. I think this is pretty easily number 2 right now, and I would be shocked again. I think we've got 3 of our 6 decks we're looking for very likely right now, and this is going to be one of them.
Yeah,
I think we talked about this earlier too. I think this deck does have a power cap on it, though.
Yeah.
Yes, but the power isn't the way it wins. It has enough power to compete. I completely agree. It's on the lower end of the spectrum when we look at like the best decks and the power they can put out, but it's on the super high end of the disruption part. And this is how it competes with the Hela. This is how it competes with the Thanos. It has enough power and it limits the opponent's power enough so that it balances out.
Yeah. I think Thanos spanks it sometimes, though. I think that's the real problem.
Definitely. The problem with this deck is if you don't get a hot start or if your disruption doesn't land, you feel like you're playing a terrible deck.
Yep.
That's true.
And if you don't see Zabu, you're just a little sad.
It's also the most boring deck that we've looked at this entire time. Like, this deck is like literally, I'm about to fall asleep. I mean, it's like a Friday night, like kind of late here, but like just looking at these cards.
Like, it wasn't the question. Like, why do people don't complain about Zabu the same way they complain about everything else? Well, the answer is because we have a little bit more leeway about Zabu because the decks around Zabu keep moving. But the reality is, a year ago, we were still doing Zabu plus Darkhawk and something. Except,
well, that and a lot of people don't realize that Zabu's beating them. They think Shang-Chi's beating them. That's why they want Shang-Chi to cost 5. They think that Sentry's beating them. They think that Iron Lads and Darkhawks are beating them. They're not. Zabu's beating them.
Yes.
Iron Lad should probably be Enchantress in this list.
I think Shadow King should be a rogue or something like that. Yes.
Yeah, we're close. Whatever. Not the perfect list, but still number 2. The standard discard that runs Corvus and Hela. I've yet to play this list, then. I played against it.
I've not played this one. I've played a variation of it, but there was like Magneto and Infinite. Like, it was much closer to the current Ella Lockjaw, and there was less discard in it.
I think I pulled this one from your tier list, but
no, because there's your name on it.
I copied it for whatever reason. Sometimes I copy it, sometimes I don't. I'm pretty sure I did, but I could be wrong.
I'm pretty sure this is not the Corvus discard list from the tier list. I'll check because I don't like to say stupid stuff. But
it's okay. No, that one's elsewhere. Don't worry about it. If that one's not there, that one's elsewhere.
Yeah, it's not the same one.
So there's the Sandman version. I think that's a different deck.
Yeah.
Oh. Is this list good? Is kind of what I'm asking.
I think it's not refined yet. I think it's on the way. But for example, the one like the Corvus discard from the tier list, I think it's more advanced. Like, for example, they started playing Colleen and Lockjaw in it to have that kind of synergy with Swarm. These kind of stuff, I think that helps. That definitely helps the deck more. As for where the deck is right now, it's hard to say because, I mean, the Hela decks are so good. I think it's going to make the list, but like the archetype is going to make the list. I would I wouldn't play it this way. So it's hard to judge.
I mean, the refined version of this deck is just the Hella deck, right? Like,
Right. I think the refined version just cuts Apocalypse.
I mean, it doesn't even necessarily cut Apocalypse. Like, I just think it cuts Apocalypse for like Lockjaw and maybe this Gambit package. Like, I think the refined version is like, what am I trying to say here? Like, this is just an attempt to do the Hella thing in a less consistent way.
Mhm.
Like that's just all this deck is. Like, if you want to do the powerful Hella thing, but you want to be like the cool kid, the hipster of Hella, like this is what you would play. Like, this is, for example, what I would play if I was like, I want to play a Hella deck. I want to play this, right? Like, I was like, I don't want to do what those like bad people that Glazer and Hooglin and Cam Best are making videos about, how bad the Hella meta is.
Like, made any videos about it?
I'm just teasing you, Glazer. Like, I don't want to be one of those bad guys. I want to be one of the good guys who's playing just a shitty version of the bad deck. And that, even though it's of the bad guy deck, to be clear, even though it's not that shitty, because not only is Howla really powerful, I think the baseline discard cards are powerful enough at this point, and you just like kind of smash them together without an intentionality, and that makes it like less consistent, but it makes it cooler and more fun.
I don't like it.
I almost feel like Hella's the worst card in the deck.
Yeah. I mean,
especially whenever you're looking at other Hella decks that are pulling back 20 power dudes.
I think this is the part that's missing with this deck. It's like it's too far into the discard part without Dracula in it, and not far enough in the Hella part with Ella in it. This is where I'm having a problem with this list.
The worst card in this deck is Swordmaster, by the way.
Let's say Swordmaster is Infinite and Hellcow is Magneto.
Let's say Swordmaster is Infinite and Hellcow is Magneto.
There's also too much random.
Can Ghost Rider can I have Dracula? Can Ghost Rider be Dracula, please?
Sure.
We are just literally the discard.
Now we're just making the discard deck that we're running.
Okay, then I'll just ask one
be
thing.
At the end.
Then it's going to be
just at the
Ellie
end.
Carrier is going to be
the worst
Lockjaw,
list,
and that's the list.
Yeah.
But
I'll be honest with you. I actually don't think this is the worst list, because I think this has way more upside than the Bounce Junk deck, which I actually do think is the worst list that we've had here.
Okay,
like, I think you just got to high roll people with Hella sometimes with this deck in a way that Junk Bounce deck is just not going to do.
I'm excited to see what happens when Corvus Glaive has a whole handful of Helicarrier cards next week.
All right, let's just move on. This isn't going to be a thing. All right, I'm
playing this list tonight, by the way, when I do my dailies. I guess tomorrow. That's how we're done with this episode.
This is the classic Invisible MODOK Hella deck. It's just much more consistent, and Eliath has disappeared. That's literally my whole logic of putting it here. It's got a reasonable-ish play rate right now. And, like, if no one's playing Goliath, this is a real deck.
Is this, like, are we going to have the other Tribunal deck? Like, are we going to have the negative Tribunal or just
it's on here.
Zabusera Tribunal in the list?
Yep.
Then this makes it list, yes. Because I want to keep the spot for those ones. I think, like, it's the same discussion as in Discard. Inside the Tribunal shenanigans, this is the worst one to me.
Why?
Because this dies to more things than his counterparts, and you have less control over it than the counterparts as well. Because the other ones have like backup plans with Miss Marvel, which you can still onslaught, because the negative gives you like turns that allow you to catch up if you didn't get a good start. Well, this one is just please happen. Please don't have Aliath. Please don't have Cosmo. There's too many please for me.
Yeah, please don't play Thanos Stone on your Magic Lane.
All right.
I agree. So, this deck is. Oh, go ahead, Gunny. I'm sorry. Did I say put?
No, I think it's fragile. There's just ways to interact with it that the other ones don't necessarily have the weakness to.
This deck list made me think of the last one as well. I think it's a step backwards in how this archetype is evolving, right? Like, I think that several metas ago, like, this is an old school, like, right when Living Tribunal came out, version of Living Tribunal. But I think in the winter we learned, like, it's much better to just do Iron Man bullshit, and just like stack up Iron Mans with a backup plan of Miss Marvel, like Dan laid out. Like that's just kind of like a much better version of like what to do with Living Tribunal, which has way less moving parts, which gives you way more outs when you don't exactly draw your cards right. Like your Mystique can double a Miss Marvel, right, and that can be enough power in like games where both decks are kind of like not doing much, right? And this deck kind of just relies on everything coming together, and it's very like your MODOK does this, which Hela does. Like you don't need this moving. We've proven that Living Tribunal is consistent enough cards without this many moving pieces. So this just like the discard Hela deck that we just looked at, like Hela decks have proved you don't need to do the discard bullshit. And I think the discard bullshit has proven that it doesn't need Hela to be consistent at this point. So it just feels like an old deck list that somebody didn't delete and decided to start playing. Yeah.
All right, bottom of the list for now. I hear no vetoes.
Yeah, bottom list.
Speaking of old lists that don't exist anymore, it's Inchinot.
I have nothing more to say, but no.
This has no chance of being on the list, right? We can just move on?
Yeah, it just lacks power now.
This deck could be really annoying still, but yes.
I mean, it still has the same problems, but now it's being constantly outpowered as well.
Yeah, and it's very predictable, right? So you know where to throw your Shang if you throw priority. It's just been around so long that people know how to counter it. There's so much destroy out there getting rid of your 1-drops.
Yeah, I think
there's Kyera, but
we need an infusion of new blood for Inchinot, and until then, it's like it's there. Cool.
It got Kyera. All right, next Lockdown. I think this is better than people think.
This is better than people think. I think Lockdown is really good because it has a chance to adapt against Ella. Like you can play Goose, you can play Jean Grey, you can play that kind of stuff. But the current ways we're playing Lockdown, which is with Storm, doesn't really make sense. Like Call Obsidian is bullying Storm and Thanos, and Ella is just looking at Storm. Is like, who cares about that card anymore? So I think Lockdown as an archetype has a lot of potential, but the way we're playing it now maybe doesn't make sense.
So, Alioth is really, really good against Hela.
Alioth is really good against Ella.
If so, you're not using Storm to win a lane against Hela. You're using Storm to make it obvious where Hela is going to be played.
I mean, kind of.
I want to say yes, but the thing is, Corvus is looking at you and saying like, "Hey, I can play Ella on 5 now."
That is fair. I don't know. So the Hela on 5 decks have been the least impressive thing in the world to me. Like, I have not been impressed by the Hela on 5 decks. Like, I think Hela is still significantly better on 6. I think you need the turns to get that stuff going.
Yeah, but
also,
Hela
Supergiant.
But Hela on 5 is a good out, right? Like that's it gives you the option to do it. Like obviously, ideally, you do need the extra turns to have the ceiling of the deck. But sometimes, like a Hela on 5 and it landing in a Storm lane, one of those is like enough to stop.
Doesn't Supergiant just turn that off?
Again, if you see Supergiant, yes.
Sure, but everything's if you see Hela, if you see Alioth, right? Like if you saw Storm, blah, 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 blah. We're playing the if you see game a lot here. I don't think this is the perfect version, but I think this has a way better matchup than we like to give it credit for.
I think at least he can work on the matchup. There are some decks that can't even work on it. This one can work on it. So this one has a real chance of getting better. Like Inchinot that we just talked before is doomed. And it's funny because it's this one playing Doom actually, but
I think this is our number 4 deck right now. I think it goes Bounce, Good Cards, Junk, Bigger, Dumber, and then this.
I haven't tested Bigger, Dumber, so I can't argue which one is 3 and 4, but sure.
Gunny?
Yeah, I can see that. It's a solid case for it. I don't have a lot of trouble against Lockdown, so it's a tough one for me.
I think Bigger, Dumber beats the crap out of Lockdown.
But is the tiebreaker just to assess the power of decks one against each other?
Yeah, basically, when we get close enough to like these two decks are basically the same thing. You compare them against the meta, and if their meta matchups are relatively similar. Bigger Dumber can also beat Thanos, and this can't beat Thanos. I think Thanos is Lockdown's real problem.
I can see that.
All right. Loki. So Loki is still really good.
This is a very interesting version of Loki.
This is, I know who made this. This is Spyros, I believe.
Okay.
I think so, yes.
So I've seen versions trying to run Professor X now too.
Yeah.
And I've seen versions cutting other cards to run like Juggernaut and Cosmo.
Loki
Which is
lockdown.
to say, if you've got priority, you can Juggernaut the Hela into a Cosmo lane.
Yeah. That's true.
And Loki's just Loki. I don't know why the fuck Storm is in this list. I still don't think Storm should be in this list. I understand that you're trying to go Storm Juggernaut, but like, I think that's just a waste.
To me, that Storm should be a Mirage, a Sentinel, or a Rogue.
Yeah.
Like,
agreed. Rogue is where I would go, but yeah. I like Sentinel. I don't like Mirage. I still think Mirage is a mistake in all of these lists. I think Ms. Marvel is also like a mistake. I think you pick Ms. Marvel or Omega Red and call it a day. I don't think you're supposed to try both anymore.
Here's a question for you for this meta tier list. Who is the audience of player, right? So you put this deck in the hands of the right people. Like, this is one of the best decks in the decks that we've talked about. You talk about the larger community. It's not.
And then are we talking about Conquest or Ladder? And so we're assuming a very good player.
yeah,
Okay.
and it's kind of the same problem. Like, we discuss it, I think, every time I come on the show. Is like, it's the bounce question.
Mm-hmm.
There are maybe 3% of the player base which are able to play bounce at the level we're going to rank it where it's ranked today. While most people are going to play bounce and tell you it's like a tier 7 deck because so like
every time I post a bounce list, I'm like, I win all my games, and people are like, I can't win with this at all. I'm like, fucking come on.
Yes. So
I think this is number one of the decks we talked about.
I don't.
You think bounce is better?
To me, Loki is struggling right now because stealing Hela's hand or Thanos' hand isn't that good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Loki has lost a lot of raw power. I just don't think this is the metagame for Loki.
So, I mean, Loki has a blob problem, right? Like, at the end of the day, blob is really, really bad for Loki. And Hela is not great for Loki unless you have Quinjet. And Loki exactly on 4.
You know, I just kind of realized for the Thanos Loki matchup is like, how many times do you have Shang-Chi in hand that you need to win against Thanos? And then you have to choose if you're going to be a Loki deck and trying to outstat them and use your Shang-Chi, or if you're going to Loki that stuff away to try to get their good stuff.
Yep, all the combos are super dependent and super draw dependent. One of my favorite things Loki, some versions of Loki do, is they'll like utterly fill their hand for when they Loki so they can't Loki play certain things. But then you still have like 2 draws to get them. It's a problem. Like, it's genuinely a problem. I'm not even sure. Like, all right. I don't think this is ahead of Good Cards Junk either.
No.
I think this is probably number 3 over Bigger Dumber.
It spanks Bigger Dumber, I'll tell you that much so much. I hate
that.
playing
Well, and it spanks Lockdown, right? Like, this deck cares not for Lockdown.
Yeah.
It's like, thank you for your cheaper Lockdown
like, I just
cards.
play awesome cards at great rates, and then Loki's like, yeah, I do that better, thanks.
Yeah, so I'm going to put Loki number 3 for now. Is anyone arguing that?
No, I'm fine with it.
All right. The negative Hela Enjoyer Tribunal. I hate this list, like, a lot. It's very good. I just think it's mean.
This is why I hate it. It's because it's good. Like,
is this better than Bounce right now? Like, it kind of is, right?
In my player's head, this deck shouldn't be allowed to be as good as it is right now. But I also know it's good because it faces a lot of Ella.
Yes.
So it's hard.
But it really beats Hela.
Yeah. That's why I don't like it.
Look, if Thanos doesn't waste its reality stone because it doesn't know what it's playing, it beats Thanos too.
Yes.
Reality stone is how Thanos beats this, right?
I don't think negative has been as good as it currently is in a very, very long time. And I mean, there's this deck, and there's also a negative destroy list, which doesn't beat Ella as much, but spanks destroy like with a passion. Like you can snap against destroy even when you don't negative. You beat them by that much. So I don't I really think like we haven't seen negative as good as it currently is for a very long time.
Now, is the problem of this deck that Saratech beats it pretty easily?
No, because you drop a cube. The thing is, against Saratech or stuff like that, you just drop a cube. While Destroy, Thanos, Ella, these kind of decks, they're going to stay based on their hand. So a lot of the time, they're going to stay in your snaps.
So it's worse in Conquest by a fair amount, though. And Enchantress totally ends
information hurts it by a million.
And Thanos can beat it, right? Thanos can stay in if they haven't used Reality Stone. Reality Stone beats this deck.
They haven't used Reality Stone.
I mean, not always. It all depends on your... Like, Reality Stone can definitely beat it some of the time, but if your starting card... If you see... If your 2-drop is Ravonna and you see negative on 4, which is just as reliable of them drawing Reality Stone when you magic, you can beat that. Like, you don't have to have 7 turns to win with this version of negative. It's great, and Smoot makes the deck more consistent, but there are plenty of times when you play negative on 4.
I think the 6-turn versions they're easier to outpower. They can win, but they have a much lower power ceiling unless they draw very, very well.
Yeah, whenever you only get 6 turns to this deck, you end up at like around 20 power per lane.
And that means like a blob can win a lane, and then like a Scar Cull can win a lane, right? Like I don't love the Thanos matchup. I think this is the top deck we've talked about so far.
I don't love the Thanos matchup either, but I don't think it's like auto retreat.
Sure. Nothing is auto loss. In Marvel Snap, nothing is auto loss.
Well, not auto loss, but like I think you're like close to 50% against Thanos. You're like 45 against Thanos with this deck.
Super Scroll is really good against Thanos. For some reason.
Yeah, it depends. Like sometimes all you're getting is a freaking Time Stone, right? Like Thanos isn't running that many.
This deck will take a Time Stone.
Not Time Stone, Soul Stone, excuse me.
Well, there's the Dino.
Yeah, they don't have to play Dino though, right? Like,
oh, trust me, they do.
I don't think so. Not with Cull.
They play.
I mean, there's a lot of decks that are just cutting Dino right now because of Corvus Glaive.
Yeah. Like Thanos, I don't know if Thanos even cares about Dino very much anymore.
I don't know. I played
whatever. This is our top deck so far, right?
Nah, I would put Bounce ahead.
Maybe for you guys. I played probably about 15 games with it, and I went negative, but that's because I don't do combo well. I'm just not a combo player. So I can I mean, Hella Enjoyer just won the C Esports Cup qualifier.
Hella Enjoyer is also completely OP with this style of deck,
right?
Right, like Hella Enjoyer is far and away the best player of this type of deck, I think, in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, this is definitely one of the top 2 or 3 decks. So
I'm fine putting it behind Bounce, ahead or behind Bounce.
I would keep I would give the top spot to Bounce so far.
Also, dear listeners, go check out Hella Enjoyer on Twitch. Wonderful person. Typing negative tribunal, and then we'll move on. All right. Boop. Oop, wrong thing. Right thing. Phoenix. This probably isn't on the list, but hey, this version of Phoenix, you don't need a PhD to play. So I think it's better for everyone who's not named Jet. It's the Nimrod version.
Yeah.
I do love this deck. I've lost a lot of cubes playing this deck, but I do love it.
I don't think it's good, but I think it'll get you to infinite.
Yep. All right, let's move on. There's no point. I just wanted to say I like Phoenix.
I
The
love
Jet version
Phoenix.
in Jet's hands is a top 5 deck, but in anyone else's hands it's not. So next up is Sarah Control. Is this deck just dead?
I think it's in a really, really bad spot currently.
Yeah,
Like
I
worse than
agree.
Lockdown, right?
Yes.
Better than Junk Bounce. Yeah. This is the Revis famous deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the meta. This was the best deck for like a week, and then the meta was like, no, thank you.
It's the most controversial Marvel Snap deck ever made.
By who?
By who?
That's the question.
By untap.gg.
Yeah, clearly. Well, whatever. This one runs Jeff, not Lizard, so it's not the same deck.
Oh, there we go. It's actually Dan Hearthstone. So congratulations, Dan. You made the most controversial deck in Marvel
I'm
Snap
then
history.
Marvel Snap.
So I've actually
there you
got
go.
a funny thing to say about that, but I will say it off air. So if you remind me.
All right.
Shuri.
Is
So
this
this
the
isn't
version
the
that
right
you came up
list.
with?
This isn't the right list. No, this is I just went and pulled the top Shuri off
Okay.
Untapped. It had a better win rate than the top Marvel Snap Zone Shuri. This list is good. This list is good. This list is good. If Hella doesn't put power in the right location, this beats Hella. Tell me I'm crazy.
No, I mean, it's the same argument I made about the discard deck, right? Like, it could beat Hella because it consistently knows where it puts its power every single game, right? Like, this deck gets to choose where it wants to contest in a way that Hella can't necessarily do. And that's going to give it a lot of upside. It can also produce some pretty, particularly with like stupid shit with Kitty Pryde. This version can like engage in really dumb things that a Hella deck can lose to. But the Hella deck can also just blow this out of the water if its cards go right. So,
Does this beat Thanos or Destroy?
Not consistent.
Does it beat Destroy?
Not
Sometimes.
consistently, but you can
Right?
armor them.
Like, it has armor, but
It can beat Destroy a reasonable amount of the time.
I don't know.
I'd rather play Destroy than Thanos with this deck.
So I think Thanos has a reasonable shot at going over the top of it. Thanos also runs Shang.
That's what I mean. So Shang's a problem. And
Is
then
it
obviously,
though? Like, not if you do the Shuri line.
I don't know. I don't think this is better than most of the things that we have on the list so far.
I don't know if I agree, but I think everyone stopped playing it, so it's less of a concern.
One
Maybe.
of the greatest gifts ever given to me in Marvel Snap. I absolutely hate playing against this deck.
Really? Things I like tend to be Shuri Red Skull. Like,
Sorry.
Bounce giggles at Shuri Red Skull. It's like, oh, thank you. Predictable power. Woof. I can play around that.
No, I'm just a hater of this deck, so don't have much more to say about it, but
Like, I've never been unbiased about Shuri. My opinion has been the same for the past 6 months. I just don't want to see it on the list for personal reasons.
Fine. We can keep it off the list
Nah,
since
it's fine.
everyone
I mean,
here hates it.
I'm not the only one
I think,
here.
look,
but
I think there's a real argument it's better than Lockdown.
it's better than what, the lockdown? Because you said lockjaw.
Lockdown.
Oh. I think in the current metagame it might, but I don't want to tell people.
Fine, let's move on. This has no business being on the list, but it's my favorite list right now, and I just wanted to talk about it. It's our last deck. It is the Woodward's 15k rank, so he can't climb like 15,000 ranks with it. I've been playing this off and on all day. I think this is an absolute joy to play.
I honestly think this deck has a shot with Proxima on Tuesday.
It beats, just for the record, straight up, will win against Hella a lot. I did it all day. Gunny saw me. Like, it puts up 20 power in every lane.
Yeah.
I honestly don't mind this deck.
What were you losing against? Oh, you were losing against Killmonger. That was it.
Yes.
Well, that was stupid. I lost 8. But no, so you beat Killmonger. What happened was X-Men. I lost 8 with this. X-Mansion gave my opponent a Supergiant.
sure.
and they put the Killmonger behind Supergiant.
Sure. Sounds like a
So I
great
couldn't-
play. Good
So
job,
I couldn't throw
opponent.
priority. Yeah, so I couldn't throw a priority. But otherwise, I have only one drop on my board before turn 6. I literally go Sunspot, Pass, Bishop, Khazar, Black Swan, everything.
There's only
Yeah,
one thing I
pretty
don't
good.
like about this deck, and that's the Sunspot. So
You don't like the Sunspot?
that's about it. Yeah.
So Sunspot is occasionally like 8 power, because on the last turn of the game, sometimes you'll just have like, you won't have a second thing to do. You'll have just like a hit monkey or a strong guy to play, right? And that means your Sunspot's getting +3 power on the last turn of the game, and it's just got like an extra 2 on turn 2. And now your Sunspot's a 5, and then if you played a Supergiant on turn 4 instead of Khazar, it's now a 3/6. Shit like that.
What does that Electro want to kill?
Largely, I mean anything, but especially Black Knight.
Hmm.
Gunny was there when I giggled uncontrollably and snapped on killing a Black Knight.
Yeah.
It was great.
What else did you lose to though? Because I remember you were
Maybe
about.
just its own deck and a point here or there sometimes.
That's what it felt like. It felt like when you lost, it was only by like a couple points and like guessing wrong between where you're putting your Electra or your Blade.
Yep. Just a point here and there, just trying to count it up and be like, you got to be perfect. It's really good. Like, this is the best like Black Swan deck. Like, if with previous Bishop, the other Black Swan decks wouldn't run Black Swan. This deck doesn't want Bishop, it wants Black Swan.
Okay.
This deck is very close to being really good. It would be very, 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 very nice if our 4/7 friend made it very good.
Oh, I think you also lost another game to like a Shadow King.
No, I beat that.
That's right.
So what if you
The Shadow-
wanted to replace Martyr? What would you replace Martyr with?
Forge.
Forge.
So Forge is less power, right, by 2.
Yeah.
But a
1,
bunch
3.
of people. So I talked about this on Doug Pie's stream for a little while. And they were like, "Why not Hawkeye?" I was like, "Because you have to play Hawkeye a turn early."
Makes sense.
I think people play this
that's
deck wrong.
That's negative. Oh yeah, I watched Doug Pie play it completely wrong. I had
Yeah.
to like re-explain every move.
You don't
Like, I
play
think
one
people play
drops
this
in this
terribly.
deck.
You play Sunspot.
Yeah, you play Sunspot, and then like you keep the 6th card out of your hand, or I guess the 7th card out of your hand, so you can draw a card next turn. Other than that, like, you're not playing one drops.
Zero's unbelievable. I watched Doug Pie throw an 8-cuber by going Titania into Electra when he could have easily gone Electra, and I'm just literally like, play Electra first in chat, and then like Electra killed a card and then sent Titania into that newly open spot. Oh, I got the best win where my opponent had a hood and bar with no name, and I played Titania and Electra there, so I killed the hood. So by -3, and then my Titania went over there, and that won the bar with no name.
That was pretty awesome.
It was very awesome. Yeah, this deck is awesome. It does not belong on the list, but if you are a whatever the name of that type of player is, then you should play this.
This probably falls in like
Jimmy?
the Timmy line.
Yeah, Timmy. Super fun. All right, we can move on from this. All right. The other 4 decks are Corvus Ramp, Destroy, Hell Lockjaw, and Thanos Lockjaw. And there's something I want to talk about on Thanos Lockjaw.
Let's do it.
So our first deck is Hella Corvus. This is immediately going to be number 1 on our list, yes? This is the Sandman Ramp version of Hella Corvus.
Can I be a dick?
Yeah.
I wouldn't even put it top 5 because I think this particular list is shit.
Sure. Fine, not this list. The list in general.
Yeah, the archetype is really good, and I think Corvus Ramp is really good, but I think Electro is like shooting yourself in the leg for absolutely no reason.
What do you put in place of Electro?
The
Sif?
the list that we've been trying, and I think like both Safety and I tweeted the same as like list with like
that one?
Black Knight,
Yeah.
Sunspot, Armor, and it just makes much more sense. I think these one gained a lot of traction because several content creators shared them.
Because Cozy tweeted it, right?
But to be like a little blunt about it, I really don't like those lists.
Look, spoiler, I think that the Corvus versions of Hela are worse than the non-Corvus versions. I'm going to die on that hill.
All right, give me an octagon.
All right. Either way, this is our number one for now, yes? Or is this actually better than Bounce? No, right?
It's
Hey,
different.
Sandman.
It depends which public we're talking to. If we're talking to players who have 4 hours a day onto Marvel Snap and can learn Bounce ins and out, it's Bounce. If we're talking to the average player who's doing dailies on the toilet, it's this one.
Yeah, I think it takes it over Bounce. Just from the mat, like exactly what Den said. Like, this is so easy to play. It plays itself. It can even this deck can beat the Bounce deck when you play wrong, right? Whereas the Bounce deck has to be played exactly right to beat it.
Fair. Destroy.
Somewhere in top 3, depending on same thing.
I think this is ahead of the Hela deck. I think Destroy is better than Hela. Not this version. I don't like Zola, but I think Destroy is better than Hela.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think the Destroy is countered by some decks so easily. So Destroy kind of fluctuates in how good it is at times. And now maybe one of those times, but I don't know. Like it's just so vulnerable to tech cards.
Sure. I think tech cards are about at an all-time low, except for Cosmo.
Well, Destroy doesn't super love Cosmo.
Yeah. But like, unless they have the Prio Cosmo thing, right? Like, and Destroy is decent at keeping Prio. That's part of why I don't like Zola. I think that you want that extra Destroy outlet of either Deathlock or Grandmaster for exactly that reason. Like, I think Destroy was basically off the list when Sarah was the best deck, but I think right now it's better than the previous list, even the better version that we're talking about from Den and Safety.
Yeah,
which
I mean,
is, by
I think
the
I have
way,
a
in my
bit of
video
a jaded experience against it as well. The deck I'm mostly playing right now is
the ultimate like
it's my
Destroy
big dumb
counter.
idiot, so it just beats us. So I'll take your guys'
Just for the
experience on
record, that version of so the version of Hela Glaive is Sunspot Black Knight Blade, Armor, Corvus and Sif, and then a billion 6-drops. Hela, She-Hulk, Magneto, Giganto, and Phenon Death.
Okay, so I think Destroy is the most consistent deck here. Like, I think it is also, the most easily targetable because it's consistent. So I would probably put it behind Hela, but and maybe behind Bounce. But, I'll bow to the Bounce players about whether they think Bounce or Destroy is better. But I think that this is easily a powerful pillar of the metagame. With or without Arlem Zola, who I also have mixed feelings about, having played a lot of Destroy in the winter. He's sometimes busted, and other times, you would literally want to draw any other card. You'd rather draw a rock sometimes than Arlem Zola.
I think because how you call it? Because Ella, some lists, at least the ramp lists, are playing more of Armor. It's going to hurt Destroy, but yeah, for now, Destroy is the top 3.
So I have Destroy at 1. Den has Destroy at 1. Roy has Destroy at 2. Gunny, 1 or 2?
I think it's behind Hela. I think it's 2.
So we have 2 1s and 2 2s. How do we decide?
Let Den decide. He's the master.
Okay. Den says it's 1. So.
All right. Did I see it?
You did.
Okay.
Did you change your mind?
No.
It's very late for you. You can change your mind.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Ella Lockjaw, this is our new number one. I think this is the version that you should be playing if you're playing this list. I think this is probably the best Conquest deck in the game. It is obnoxious.
It is crazy.
It is the
I
best
hate this
Conquest
deck.
deck in the game, actually, this week.
It is?
No, wait, let me check. No, I think it was. I think it was. Maybe there was one list of Thanos Lockjaw that beat it, but overall, it was the best.
Yeah, this is a nightmare. Like, it's just they snap, and you're just like, shit. Like, how do you stay in against this snap?
Yes, I do think the ramp list is better than this one, but looking like based on the list that we saw, I like this one better.
Well, it's not the list; it's the archetype, right?
Yes. Then, if we're talking archetype, to me, it's ramp, destroy, this one. I would reverse both Hellas.
So I think this list is better. I honestly just think this list is better than the ramp one. Like, this list doesn't miss. It doesn't discard the wrong thing and lose. Like, ever.
It doesn't discard the wrong things and lose.
Like, it's running exactly 2 discard cards, right? Like, and it just gets them off consistently. It doesn't discard Hella basically ever. Unless it wants to.
Lady Sif definitely sometimes discards Hella, so...
Not if you play it well. Like, I've watched a lot of Husky Puppies. Like, it'll happen, like, but that's like a turn 5 Hail Mary, if it happens.
Yeah.
Like, you're just not playing it with Hella in hand unless you already have, unless you already have Death in hand, and you're never blading away your Death.
Yeah.
Like, if you have Lady Sif in hand, Jubilee is largely a ridiculously safe play. You can play almost anything into Lockjaw without any fear. Like, it ends up working just obnoxiously. Also, I think the best version of this runs Scar, but I could be wrong. I'm personally a very big Scar fan in this list. Because there's games where you go, something like, discard into whatever, into, turn 4 Shard, into Scar, into other big thing, and just win.
That's right.
Gunny's. I think this is number 1. I don't know why the other version is better. The other version has Corvus lose at the game a fair amount. Like, here, I'm gonna read out that other list. Like, alright, so you've got Sunspot Blade.
I mean, I think
Knight,
it's completely subjective in the end, so...
Well, I don't know, like... Corvus Glaive is just, like, is great, right? But it is, by definition, a dangerous card.
No, it's a dangerous card if you consider Ella to be your only game plan. It's not if you consider you can just slam big points. I mean, the other deck can go, like, Black Knight into Armor, into Lady Sif, into Weapon, like, into Ebony Blade, into Sandman, into Magneto. And that's just a good card Black Knight deck from a month ago, and that was a top 3 deck as well.
Okay. So let's move Destroy down. And then we'll vote over which Hella is the number 1. I vote Hella Lockjaw. You vote
I vote
Hella
Ramp.
Gunny? You're muted. Still muted. Roy, go while he figures out how to unmute himself.
I'll vote Hella Lockjaw. You've convinced me.
And we'll wait on Gunny, and then we'll figure out a tiebreaker if we need to.
That's fine.
Gunny, any idea? Or shall we move on? I have no idea what happened to him. Oh well, let's keep going.
He just looks muted on the website. Like, it just looks like he clicked his own microphone on the recording website.
Maybe.
There we go.
There he goes. Gunny's back.
Okay.
Hella Lockjaw or Hella Ramp?
Isn't there a hella lockjaw ramp version running around that does both?
There is, but there is.
It's much harder to use.
Okay. I think the lockjaw version is better.
It's a travesty. Sorry, I just always wanted to say that.
And now we can talk about the best deck in the game.
Ah,
Thanos Lockjaw. I don't care if it's this version or if it's the Corvus version.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, they're the number one deck, yes?
yes.
I think so.
For the record, I like this version better than the Corvus version, but like, I don't think there's a huge difference.
When does Professor X come back into the deck?
Yesterday-ish.
Where's Professor
Right? Like,
X?
doesn't, like, Professor X just beats Hella.
Yeah.
Like, if you can scam a lane early and then just throw all your points into a different lane, doesn't it just win?
It could.
Or, like, you have Shang-Chi, right?
Right?
Like, if you've won a Professor X lane and they're ahead in the others, then you can just Shang and win.
But do you still play Lockjaw?
I think so.
So what do you cut here?
Like,
You
it's just alternate game plans. You don't have to worry about winning through Lockjaw, right?
Wait, so you cut Leech and you get X, basically?
You cut Leech, you get X, and then I think you need to run, you're running Corvus over Psylocke. Or Corvus over Kyra. I guess you don't super need Kyra anymore, right? And then you're debating Double Dino or not. I think you probably cut Double Dino.
If the way you win is you Professor X a lane and you put all your points on the other lane, I kind of like Kyra.
That's fair.
I think Kyra is so important in this deck. So one thing I noticed while playing
Dino's
this deck is that, like, Thanos is just cheating. It can win so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Kyra just wins games where, like, the Rackety Bridge or all these other weird places. And then that's not even, like, one of its game plans. It could win through a million different ways. It's just crazy. This deck is too much.
So then Psylocke for Corvus, Leech for Professor X, and then Devil Dino for whatever different big card.
Yeah.
Ideally a 5, but probably a 6. Maybe even Doc
Mobius.
Ock.
Maybe Mobius.
Why Mobius?
I don't know. Damien's been doing really awesome stuff using a Mobius lately. Just there's so many cost reduction things that it beats.
Sure, maybe Mobius. I was gonna say I don't remember what I was gonna say. There was a card I liked in my head.
I said Doc Ock, but I don't know if I like that.
I think I like Doc Ock. If I can win a lane Professor X and Doc Ock and know exactly how much power I need to win a lane.
Maybe it's Jeff.
It could just be Jeff since you have Professor X. Claw. Yeah, there's something here. Either way, this is the best deck in the game, right? A version of this is the best deck in the game, and then there's probably ways to tweak it for the meta that make it even better.
Well, I think the reason why it's the best deck in the game, it's because it's one of the few decks that can compete with Ella on points, except you can't really make Ella good against the meta. Ella is good or it isn't. Thanos can adapt.
I mean, I think this is the best deck, whether Hell exists or not. I think this is the best deck in Marvel Snap.
It just cheats.
It cheats. It cheats like 4 different ways.
So it can compete with Hela, but it can also tech like some of the other. It's got Shang-Chi, and like we talked about before with Kyra, like it just does things.
Do you throw Ella?
It does all the things.
You can. There's versions of that. I don't like it.
Then why do you
I feel like it's
Corvus?
unnecessary.
I love Corvus in this deck.
Yeah, but why not Wave then, for example?
Why not
What's
what?
that?
Why not Wave?
I like Corvus better because it just continuously gives you more things to throw in a Lockjaw, extra points to play your 6 drops early. And really, it's just kind of what I talked about before is like, you just play Corvus, and as long as you don't discard the wrong things, then you win.
Yeah, I think this is like the ultimate home for Corvus. Hell is fine, right? Like, but like sometimes you're just going to Corvus away a couple stones, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's not a billion things to hit in this, and it's worth remembering that Blob is still the biggest thing in the game. Most games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is the most boring Thanos has ever been, but it's also probably the best Thanos has been since the original Thanos Lockjaw.
Yes, sir.
I like playing against Thanos more than I like playing against Hela.
Oh, not me. I'll take the Hela matchup all the time.
They should just stop
All right.
printing good Thanos cards, aka all Marvel Snap cards. So,
Well, they should stop printing cards that go well in Thanos Lockjaw. I'm very curious if this deck exists without Lockjaw,
I mean,
or how this deck
can
exists
they
without
stop
Lockjaw.
making cards that go into Thanos Lockjaw? Because this month they all did.
So they specifically built the last 2 months, like Kyara, Scar, right? Like those are easily the best 2 cards last month.
I don't even
And then
remember
this month,
what else we had.
Hercules.
Grandmaster, Hercules, and
I had a lot of fun with Grandmaster, but yeah.
Me too. I had a lot of fun with Hercules, but they're not as good as Kyara and Scar. And then something else.
and Meek. It was Meek,
Yeah.
Grandmaster, and Hercules were the 3 other cards.
Meek was okay. His name is fun.
Look. So Kyara and Scar were easily the best 2 cards. And then Cull Obsidian and Corvus are the best 2 cards so far in their Grand Thanos, right?
Yes, sir.
Like, there's only 12 spots. They should probably release cards that aren't better than the 12 busted cards we have. Thanos. They also just need to fix Lockjaw.
That's a lot of things they need to do.
I mean, really, largely just fix Lockjaw. I'm curious what Thanos looks like without Lockjaw. It wasn't broken until people put Lockjaw back in it.
Basically, just make Lockjaw a 4 cost, so if you want to abuse it 3 times, you need
Agreed.
to do it the turn you play it.
Zabu. But yes.
Yeah, but at least you have to run Zabu.
Yeah. Look, I think that's the fix too. I've said so multiple times.
I had 2 really creative fixes for it, but I don't think we're going down a rabbit hole of how to fix Lockjaw correct.
I don't
think we have enough time on one podcast to do so.
Fair. Roy would like to go to sleep. All right. We have our final list. Our final list is number 10, Lockdown. Number 9, Bigger Dumber Idiots. Number 8, Loki. Number 7, Good Cards Junk. Number 6, Hella Enjoyers Negative Tribunal. Number 5, Bounce. Number 4, Destroy. Number 3, Hella Corvus. Number 2, Hella Lockjaw, although those 2 are fundamentally in a tie. And number 1, Thanos Lockjaw in whatever form you like.
Is it on purpose that it's not showing on the screen yet?
It doesn't show on the screen.
Oh, it doesn't show.
I just have to read it. It'll show on the final one. The weird app doesn't update like live.
Okay.
But I have the list separately. So when it goes live on the air, it'll be there.
Cool.
All right, that brings us to our last segment of every episode, which is Variant of the Week. This week, Glazer picked everyone's favorite tech card in Hella is Armor. All right, so we've got 2 armors here. The one on the left here is the summer variant or summer vacation variant. Which of our friends here chose the summer vacation variant? Dan, my friend, why the summer vacation?
To be honest, they're my 2 favorite variants, but I just like the goofiness of the card on this one. It's just like, I don't know, I like stupid designs where, I don't know, like, how do I explain this? Like, this is why I like Dan Hip so much, and the right one is Dan Hip, is the fact that I don't have to click on the card and zoom in to understand what's going on. Like, there are some artists which I think have an amazing talent, and they make me want to click on the card. But if I don't click, I don't actually see the art. So I have like a weak spot for variants which you can see just in general. Like, you don't have to click. They just on the game and you're like, oh my god, that's so cool. And these 2 variants for Armor do it for me, and I have a weaker spot for the Cannonball because it's just goofy and fun.
All right. The other 3 of us picked the Dan Hip. Gunny, why'd you pick the Hip?
It's just so happy. Just like Armor is in the middle of her giant suit of armor. She's got a big smile on her face. The armor itself's got his eyes closed with a big smile. It's a fun card.
It's very cute. I will also say that the base art of Armor is one of the stronger base arts. So
that's very true.
I have no variants, and I don't regret it yet. I will. But
Hip Armor is one of my favorite variants in the game. It is delightful. It's so cheerful.
It is.
It's so great.
All right. Friends, all right, we're moving towards the final moments of this episode. All right, GunnyT, will you remind our loyal listeners and loyal viewers, if they were to become your loyal listeners and loyal viewers, what would they find if they tuned in to you?
Absolutely. Thanks, Roy. If you're tuned into Snap Tactics GunnyT on YouTube, you will find information where we go over the tips that Glazer has covered the past 2 weeks. So I'm not doing the normal deck highlight with gameplay showing that deck and whatever the new hot deck is. What I'm doing is I record a couple games and then I go over my thought process through them. So I'm actually doing a replay. I'll pause the button or pause the video in between so I can actually talk through what my ideas are and why I'm doing certain things. I like to show one win and one loss on my videos because I think we learn a lot by losing as well. So if you're just trying to grow in your abilities, or if you'd like a little refresher, that's a good place to check it out. Maybe grow a little bit yourself. I personally get a lot out of tactically thinking about my games and going through them. So not only am I helping to grow you, but I am growing myself through my content.
So we here on Snap Judgments like showing appreciation. So a lot of our content is built around trying to highlight other creators and show appreciation. And a lot of our viewers and audience feel the same way. And dear viewers and audience, if you are that type of person who would like to show appreciation, then you need to be following GunnyT because he has done a massive amount of work behind the scenes,
Definitely
not only in the tournament and the Discord and trying to build the community, trying to help individual players one-on-one. This is a person who's all about doing the work in a straightforward organized manner that really benefits not only himself, because he's getting very little benefit out of any of this, but in order to better the community. And he straight up deserves your appreciation and support. Go follow.
Thank you, Glazer.
Anytime.
All right, Den, once again, what would our loyal listeners and loyal viewers, who, if for some reason at this point that you have overtaken both Bootman and Savage Yeti as our most frequent guest, if for some reason some of our loyal listeners and loyal viewers were not already fans of yours, what would they find if they tuned in to your content?
Mostly analytical database content. I try to do a little bit more diversity lately, but most of my work on SnapZone is through the tier list, analyzing data, sharing what is like the best decks in the game according to as large as possible sample sizes. And otherwise, I'm just saying stupid stuff on Twitter and hoping people don't take me too seriously the rest of the time.
All right. This isn't actually an advertisement for Den. This is an advertisement for Marvel Snap Zone Premium. But if you're watching this on the Marvel Snap Zone YouTube, the only other videos that we post
Hashtag
there right
sponsored,
now,
by the way.
Yeah. The only other videos we post there are Den's coaching videos. And if you want to get better at Marvel Snap and you have $10 to spare, because that's how much it costs for Marvel Snap Zone Premium, right? I think.
Per month, yes.
Sure.
You can get it for like half that price if you take a yearly plan.
Cool. So it's worth it. It is genuinely like I've sent to numerous people there, and everyone I do comes back to me completely raving. You can watch it. But it's not the same as participating. I've watched it and I enjoyed it. I watched most of them, not all of them, but most of them. You genuinely will learn from watching them, but there's nothing like participating, being able to ask questions. Why does that happen? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? Okay, you load up your game. We'll watch you play games. Let's do this. Let's do that. It's top-notch coaching at an extremely affordable price. Remember that most coaching from a player of Den's caliber is going to run you $50 to $100 an hour.
Really?
And this is...
My coaching is like 17 to 20 an hour.
You are way too nice. Well, then you should also, like, straight up... sorry, Terrence. Just give Den the 17 to 20 an hour, because my friends, at an hourly rate as a teacher, I don't roll out of bed for less than 50 an hour.
I just like coaching, I guess. I'm sorry.
Look, Den's an amazing coach. You should be giving him money if you want to get better and you care. You should be giving him money.
Like, nobody's forcing you to get better.
No one's forcing. I don't have a gun, right? Like, I'm not Gunny. All right. Sorry. No, but like no one's forcing you. But if you want to get better at Marvel Snap, there is genuinely no better way than coaching, and there's no better coach than Den. So you should make sure you look him up, check him out, and like I did not realize his individual coaching was that cheap. You should go do that because that's ridiculous.
Well, definitely the AFT agents that are now listening to this podcast are going to all go and get coaching from Dan over there. All right, but now we get to my favorite part of every episode now, where Aaron gets to read all of our wonderful patrons who we really appreciate supporting this show.
Doing this with a stuffy nose is going to be fun. All right, you got Abigail Giesland, Mandatory Burnout, Cables, DG Wingfield, Direwolf, LAB, Fothor Newman. Thank you for covering for me, Fothor. Good Dog Gamer, Inc., Jay Navarrete, JD McDonaldinho, Aquila Platono, Kirtix Lee, Koire, Doku, Philip Ratkovich. Let's see if I said that right. Haplo, Kenny Loggins. Yes, we're in the danger zone. Rob Silverman, Robert Rivern, Scott G, The Bizza, Jay Bussy, X-Force V, Models, Louis Antunes, Matt Conduit, Matt H, Mikey Hijinks, No Flex, Ocularis, Pretty Chill, Seamus, Spike Jones, Two Ties, Tucker, The Pirate King, The Homie Min, and of course the one and only GunnyT.
All right, so just a quick reminder of how to engage with us. We are on Twitter/X at SnapJudgeCast. We are still very proud to be the official Marvel Snap Zone podcast. You should go and join their best large Discord in the Marvel Snap community. The link is in the description of this episode. Our email is snapjudgmentspodcast@gmail.com. And our YouTube is at Snap Judgments Pod, and our Patreon is at Snap Judgments, which fully brings us to the end of this episode, where I get to sadly say goodbye to our special guest, Gunny. Thank you for joining us and joining the two-time club for Snap Judgments. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on today.
Very, very happy to have you. Den, thank you once more for joining us and taking the crown from our friends Bootman and Yeti. International mail is very expensive and very slow, look forward to your crown in the mail soon.
Thank you. This is still the best reason I have to stay up until 5 a.m. every month.
All right.
Unbeaten.
We are moving to the end of this episode now. Just a quick reminder, folks, starting next week, we will no longer be a Marvel Snap podcast. We will be a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth podcast. So we will see all of you then for that enlightening discussion. But until then, Glazer, as always, each and every week, it is wonderful to do this with you.
Thank you, my friend. Peace and love, everybody, and Sephiroth.
All right, friends. Stay safe. Have a good rest of your week. Make good choices and keep on snapping.